welcome to Spotlight. My guest today is Dr. Sobel. He is the Dean of the Wayne State University School of Medicine. He is a long-term member of the School of Medicine faculty with an extensive experience in both clinical practice and medical administration. He held many titles and positions, and he had received many awards throughout his career. I'd like to welcome Dr. Sobel. Hello, Dr. Sobel.
Hi.
How are you today?
I'm well, and you?
Good, and I'm honored to be here and talk to you about medicine today.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. Can you tell me, how has your journey been like as the Dean of School of Medicine at the Wayne State University?
Well, I had a long journey before I became Dean. I've been Dean for 2.5 years.
Yes.
And I graduated from medical school in Johannesburg in South Africa.
Yes.
At the University of the Witwatersrand. And I've been practicing medicine for the last almost 52 years. So I graduated from medical school in 1965.
Yes.
And this is my 52nd year.
Yes.
And I came to the United States in 1976. So I've been in the United States for over 40 years.
And you've been in practice for 52 years?
Right, correct.
Okay.
So what can I tell you? When I left South Africa when I left South Africa in 1976, I came to the United States to specialize in the field of infectious diseases. I started off at Bethesda at the National Institute of Health in Maryland, where I studied basic science research. Mm-hmm. From there, I did a further fellowship in infectious diseases in Philadelphia, and finally arrived in Detroit at Wayne State University in 1985 to assume the position of Division Chief of Infectious Diseases. And I had the next 29 years I remained in the division as the chief, and made the migration migrated to the Dean's office in 2014.
Okay, so how has it been like as a dean?
Well, a dean's life is not easy.
Yes.
A dean's life is quite stressful, but can also be very enlightening and very stimulating. And
yes.
The medical school is the largest medical school in North America, and with 1,200 medical students, another 300 or 400 graduate students doing masters and PhD degrees.
Yes.
And we have, almost 2,000 physicians that are part of the various clinical practice groups, several hundred PhD faculty that are involved in teaching. So it's a cast of many people.
Yeah.
And it's been very challenging and difficult because the healthcare system is constantly changing.
Yes.
And we are in the midst, politically and otherwise, of changes in the healthcare system. So there's never a dull moment in my life.
Well, as we all know, getting into medical school is no easy task, from challenging med courses to MCATs to a letter of recommendation. What's your advice to the applicants that are trying to get into medical school?
Well, it has always been difficult to get into medical school in this country.
Yes.
As you know, prior to applying to medical school, one has to achieve a primary undergraduate degree, a Bachelor's of Science, a Bachelor of Arts degree, and then the potential medical student undertakes an MCAT exam. And we get about 6,000 applications for medical school here at Wayne State. Every year we accept 300 new medical students every year. It is very competitive here, as it is at all medical schools. Michigan today has 6 medical schools. It used to have only 3. But in the last 4 or 5 years, they've had 3 young new medical schools crop up. And so we have the original 3, which are called university, they're all public universities.
Yeah.
And they are research universities, and these are the University of Michigan, Michigan State in Lansing, as well as Wayne State University in Detroit. And these are 3 public universities, and they are all research universities. In contrast, we've had 3 new medical schools crop up, one in Western Michigan, Kalamazoo, one in Central Michigan and Mount Pleasant, and finally one that is linked to Beaumont Hospital and Oakland University.
Yeah, and does the MCAT has a higher toll on acceptance than the GPA, in your opinion?
Well, I'm not sure that's true. We accept, rather than simply looking at the grade point average or GPA and the MCATs, we look at both. But acceptance is not exclusively dependent on these 2 exams. We have a holistic approach. We look at the individual. We look at every candidate individually. We look at their other characteristics, what their other contributions in research, in education, in travel. The personalities also contribute, and in general, we tend to accept people that are highly motivated to helping other people.
Yes.
So it's the acceptance or not is dependent on many things other than just the GPA and the MCATs.
Yes. So do you think like the competition is getting too tough because a lot of students are not getting accepted and they have to go through maybe getting a master's like for biomedical science?
So it's always been difficult to get into medical school. It's never been easy. And some students whose grade point averages and MCAT scores really are not, do not reach the level of acceptance, are best advised to spend a year or 2 getting additional education in the form of a master's degree, or spending time in research laboratories, or providing some other service function, which certainly enhances their chance of getting into medical school.
Yeah, any suggestion for fulfilling the requirement for community service?
Community service is best measured by being real service to something that is linked more to social justice, something that really implies a true service by a true contribution, a true sacrifice, is much more relevant than simply meeting a simplistic definition of community service.
Oh, okay. Well, we're going to shift now to your work as an MD specialist for infectious disease, and you are a researcher fellow. So how has your experience been like, and what's the most challenging about this job?
About the job or my career?
Your career.
Okay. So I think that most students, by the time they leave medical school, have a very good idea what they want to do with their careers. It's not always so simple, and many of the young medical students struggle to be certain of which career path to follow once they leave medical school. And medical school being only 4 years, only 2 clinical 2 years of clinical rotations, it can be difficult for a young person to be certain what career path to choose. And sometimes they may initially start their clinical careers once they graduate from medical school with a degree, and that's to spend a year or 2 doing to do a general rotation. We call this a transitional year, where they continue to taste or to experience all aspects of clinical medicine, so as to make a much more informed consent as to a long time and a lifetime commitment to medicine. I personally, as a young man, had difficulty choosing. I loved everything, and I wanted to do everything, and I made several choices, which I subsequently felt were not suited for me, and I just changed. There's no rush. You have your whole life to do medicine, and if you make make a mistake, or you have a change in heart as to which pathway to follow, that's okay. So I did. I started off wanting to study pediatrician, and then pediatrics, and then chose adult internal medicine, and then I couldn't be certain what I wanted to subspecialize in, so I moved.
Isn't it major like a shift from pediatrics to...
Not a major shift.
No?
Not a major shift. But then I discovered eventually by 1976 that I wanted to specialize in infectious diseases. And at the time, the only place in the world to study this specialization, to achieve this, was the United States. I immigrated to the United States in 1976, underwent all the problems of immigration. It's on the one hand, one's medical degree is unique in that it serves as a international medical passport. It's an international passport allowing you to travel from one country to the other. Of course, when you move from one system to another, you have to pay your dues. You may have to do an exam or two. You may have to spend another year or two in your training. Most of the time, it's very minimal. As long as you're able to pass the examinations, you switch from country to country. It's much easier to do this as a physician than as a lawyer or an attorney, where the systems may be totally different. Okay. But I would reassure young people who are uncertain as to which specialty or which form of medicine to practice, they have time.
So not many doctors at that time specialized in infectious diseases, right?
When I first came to this country in 1976, it was very hard for an international medical graduate to even get an interview into an infectious disease program.
It was very hard.
It was very difficult. But today it's not difficult at all to get a fellowship or additional training in infectious diseases, because it's not a very popular, in-demand speciality. And people choose career pathways dependent on all sorts of considerations. It's more than just an inherent passion. It also may depend on a variety of financial factors. And that's because so many graduates of medical school in this country leave medical school with a substantial tuition, financial obligation. They have a debt. And it may be considerable. It may be several $100,000, and this profoundly influences their career choices. It's unfortunate that these financial considerations actually end up influencing career selection and career choices. But the training in medicine is very expensive, and it's unfortunate that it is so. And it's uniquely expensive in this country. No other country in the world is it a major financial obligation and financial stress as it is in this country. Having said that, it can take many years actually to pay back your debt, your tuition costs.
It will be a long time, obviously.
It can take a decade or longer.
And if the doctor is not successful, will he be able to pay back the money?
As long as you graduate from medical school, and as long as you've passed all the appropriate exams, there's every likelihood, although not guaranteed, you'll get into a residency. So while it's not more difficult to get into medical school today than it was, say, 5 or 10 years previously, it is much more difficult to find a residency position unless the graduated medical student who is now a physician has...
so that's the problem now, finding a residency.
Finding a residency position, because there are more medical schools, there are more medical school graduates, there's several thousand more every year, and there are the same number of positions available to do specialty training, whether you're going to family medicine or neurosurgery. You still have to compete for residency slots. And the number of residency slots is fixed, and it's determined by the Congress through what is called the CMS, through the Department of Health. And there are limited and fixed number of positions available to specialize. So every year there are more and more U.S. graduates competing for the same number of slots. The slots have not decreased, but they haven't increased either.
They have not increased.
They have not increased. Furthermore, in the past, competing for these limited number of slots have been international medical graduates, of which I am one. I was an international medical graduate in 1976. But for many, many years, the international medical graduates have played an enormous role in contributing to the supply of healthcare practitioners in this country. This country could not have met its needs in terms of providing healthcare, especially in the urban areas as well as in the rural areas of the citizens of this country. And they were dependent on immigrant physicians coming in who'd been trained elsewhere all over the world. And they were dependent on these physicians to come in after their medical school training and doing their residencies in this country, remaining in this country, and meeting the healthcare needs of citizens who were not being served by U.S. graduates themselves, U.S. citizens themselves.
So the question is, do international students have less chance here in this country?
So you're 100% correct. So today, you've got the same number of slots, you've got increased U.S. graduates, and that means there are going to be fewer and fewer international medical graduates accepted into the residency positions. So the next few years, and things may change, but in the next few years it's going to be more and more difficult for international medical graduates, no matter whether they come from Asia or Africa or the Middle East, no matter where they come from, it's going to be more and more difficult for them
and
to
more
find...
challenging, obviously.
Yes, to find a medical residency or surgical residency position. And if you don't get a residency position, you can't get a license. If you can't get a license, you can't practice.
So what do? You just go to a different profession?
You do, yes. You go to something else.
Other than medicine?
Other than medicine. If you cannot get a residency position, you'll never get a license. You don't get a license, you don't practice.
Yes.
So this is a major change. So for the first time in literally decades, there's going to be a decrease in the number of international medical graduates occupying a residency position.
That's interesting to know.
Yes.
Being in a practice for over 52 years, how do you think the transition of medicine throughout the years since you started till now?
Oh, there have been enormous changes. 50 years is a long time.
Yes.
And when one graduated in the 1960s, as I did, your clinical skills were paramount. There were fewer drugs, there were fewer diagnostic methodologies. Particular imaging was not less, radiologic imaging was much less sophisticated. So the clinical skills were paramount. You had to be an expert diagnostician, relying on your clinical experience and your clinical quality and competence. Over the last five decades, there have been massive changes in the number of drugs, the quality of the drugs, the diagnostic tests, and with all these advances, there's been a weakening or an atrophy of the clinical skills. So the doctors don't need to be as expert as they were in terms of clinical skills, because they now have a variety of technological advances that allows them to dispense with the old methods. So the stethoscope is becoming potentially out of date, obsolete, and diagnostic skills have really diminished. So the newer graduates of the medical schools, the more recent graduates, do not have the level of clinical competence that the previous generations of physicians had. But on the other hand, they have radiologic and other diagnostic tests that makes up for the lack of clinical skills. So there's a change in the quality of physicians, but there's an even bigger change in the way medicine is practiced.
So the technology has affected
no question.
The way you practice medicine?
Entirely. So the days of in which every citizen had a family practitioner who knew the family, could advise, was involved in all medical decision making, those days are over. Today we have a system that is very expensive, very specialist dependent, and much more expensive. So when you move from a primary care-based system, a clinical competence-based system, to a technology-dependent system that is dependent on specialists, it's no surprise that the costs of healthcare have just rocketed in this country. And it's rocketed massively. In every decade, the costs of providing healthcare increases, and it rises more rapidly in the United States than in any other country in the world.
Yes. So what do you think of the future of healthcare mobility?
Well, there's no question that the availability of all these new technological advances and all the new diagnostic tests and the new drugs make us much more capable and able to handle all the medical challenges. Mm-hmm. Added to this are we have computers and electronic medical records, and every physician spends a considerable period of time today wasting their time, I think, pounding their computers as they, instead of looking into your eyes and helping one diagnose a variety of medical conditions. So the method of practice has changed. Home visits don't occur anymore. Doctors now divide their lives into being either I'm going to work in a hospital, or I'm going to work in a clinic, or work in my office. And there's separation within the occupation. In other words, I'm a hospitalist, I only work in a hospital, and I only work shift work, and I like it this way, and there's no continuity of care, but what's much more important in their doctor's life is the quality of his or her or their family life rather than their service. So service considerations, dedication to the practice of medication is diminishing as lifestyle considerations become more important.
But it certainly does make the lives of the doctors easier, right? In a way?
I'm not sure I'm interested in an easier life for the doctors, and it's very different. One sees tremendous generational changes. So I look at my own son, who's a physician, and I'll soon look at my grandchildren, perhaps will be physicians.
Yes.
And their needs, their demands are very different from one generation to another. I think the quality of medicine, in spite of all the advances, has taken a step back in not having primary care physicians, family-oriented physicians, and having a physician advocate. Mm-hmm. It's so much better when you have a physician advising you how to navigate the difficulties of specialist and complicated medicine, whether it's cardiology or oncology, cancer care. It's so much better when you have a physician advising you what to do as your advocate, giving you advice.
Yes.
Than having to do this on your own. And the system is demanding that you do it on your own. Mm-hmm. Many of the things that are being abandoned or represent a loss in terms of quality of medical care.
Mm-hmm. Well, Dr. Sobel, you have been named a best doctor in America since 1998 and a top doctor since 1995. Mm-hmm. How does that make you feel?
Well, that's not important in my life. What's important is we continue to produce better quality physicians. There are challenges. The challenges are political as well as social, as well as technical, and I can only say.
Doesn't it make you feel content?
Oh, let me assure you, there's no profession that offers the same fulfillment to one's creativity, that meets the challenges of life, that allows you to express your creativity, and allows you to have a challenging life, a more fulfilling life, a fulfilling life both economically, spiritually, emotionally, and it's a wonderful career for anybody who wants to who's planning on a medical career.
Who has most influenced your life? Or what inspired you?
you know, I'm not sure anybody inspired me. I've been fortunate
Yes.
in having many inspiring physicians. I've had the contact with these individuals at medical school, as a resident, in many countries that I've practiced in. Having mentors, having people inspire you, having people that you admire and you wish to replicate what they do, and is a great opportunity and a great fulfilling component of one's life. Nothing more fulfilling than medicine.
What's next?
What's next? So actually it's an interesting question, because I think many individuals have difficulty retiring.
Yes.
I think many physicians have difficulty retiring. Being an internist, as opposed to a surgeon, allows you to practice for longer. As you know, today's 70-year-olds are the new 60-year-olds.
That's what I hear.
So we can practice for longer. As an internist, one can continue for much longer, as long as you have the commitment, the competence, the mental competence, and the desire to help people. You can continue well into your 70s, if not into your 80s.
And
today.
the spirit too.
That's true. So I have no plans to retire.
That's good news.
But one never knows what is around the corner in terms of your own personal health issues and so on. So feeling fit and strong, I'm planning to stay on, both as dean, and after that is return to what I really love, which is to go back to clinical medicine.
That's great. That's very nice. What's your advice for the upcoming generation?
No, I think that I'm not sure I have any real smart or wise words to make. I think if you've chosen medicine, you need to be committed. I particularly want to instill in the students and the residents that I work with what we call an intellectual curiosity, a desire to understand medicine, to understand the process, to understand your patients, and a commitment and most important, a responsibility. Becoming a physician instills and demands of you a certain responsibility. You're not allowed to say, Mr. or Mrs. Patient, I don't know what's going on, I can't help you, bye-bye, goodbye. You're not allowed to do that.
Yes.
If you reached a level of frustration where you're unable to help somebody directly, you have to find the right solution for them by finding the appropriate physician or clinician who's going to be able to solve the problem. You're not allowed to walk away from your responsibilities, ever.
Good advice. Okay, Dr. Sobel, I want to thank you for having us today at your office at Wayne State University, and I would like to come back and talk to you more about medicine another time. Thank you very much, and you have a great day.
It's been my pleasure, and hopefully you'll come back in another 10 years.
I hope so. Thank you so much.
Bye-bye.